Hello there and welcome. In this video, I will guide you in 7 steps through my new Barbarian Elemental build. We're going to go over all things that are important to know, and I hope that you will have fun with this one. So in the first step, let's talk about the quick summary of what we have here. So this is a build that focuses on cheap summoned elementals, lowering their upkeep cost while maintaining a pretty high economy basis. It is less focused on bringing your elementals on tier 3 as fast as possible, but I really am happy with what happened here. It has a very strong fighting power early on, especially if you can weave in a giant hero or a dragon hero. And yeah, I really like the flexibility this one also has towards the late game, but more about that later. So let's move on to number 2, to the racial traits that I've chosen for these fellas. So since the Barbarian culture is really enjoying critical hits a lot, I went for Overwhelm Tactics, because this amps up the quality of our cultural units by a lot. It doesn't work for elementals, sadly, but it is still an upgrade for all of our troops. You could, I think, easily replace that with something else if you wanted to, but given the fact how much I like those big crits on the Barbarians, I found this really nice to have. I also went for a light-footed, because here again it's all about keeping the formation intact. The most powerful cultural units of the Barbarians like to get up close and personal, and therefore it's pretty nice to be not blocking your allies. I think here you have a plethora of different things that you can play. It's just my personal preference, because it upgrades Berserkers insanely to have this capability with light-footed. Your choice. I went for adaptable here, well, mostly because I enjoy high XP troops. Here again, you could even go for ice adaptation, which would fit into the theme of the build very well and would give you a nice early game mana income. Now, cultural trait wise, I went for Druidic Terraformers for the lowered elemental unit upkeep cost, and the lower terraformings are really nice if you are also playing a giant. They really enjoy that too. Secondary, mana channelers, because we want those summoning spells cheap. It also yields extra XP for magic origin units, which is exactly what our scheme enjoys. So, that's that. With the cultural traits, I would say it's hard to go up with something different than these if you want to stick to the elemental build path directly. If you have an idea which would work better, please let me know in the comment section. I'm all ears, because I have a hard time finding other candidates that would fit in here well, that synergize with your strategy so good. Now, number 3, let's talk tomes. So, starting out, you have to actually 2 ways that you can go for. You can either start with this or the other one. I started out with Rock, enjoyed it a lot. You gain Obsidian Weapons, which is for your entire roster, a slight damage upgrade. Pretty enjoyable nevertheless, because it's really applying to all ends of your build. You gain Stone Spirits, which are bread and butter shield units. You don't need your cultural so much, because these guys are just there for you. Gargoyles are basically discount Berserkers. They're not bad at all, because they're cheap, they're robust, and I really do like them. You have Rock Blast, single target nuke, punching people out of defense modes, really good. And with Earthkin and Stone Skin, we have even some defensive measures. Don't use too, or don't expect too much from the Central Core. It is something that you can add in, but I personally think it is not too synergistic with what we are doing here. It's also not too synergistic with the Barbarians. They love forests more. Next, tier 1, Cryomancy. So after a really long time of thinking about it, I went with this one, and I stick to this one, because double dipping into unit enchantments with Frost Arrows and Frost Blades, we're doing exactly that. We have now a real nice oomph behind our units. Also, the elementals of ours inherit all of these traits. We also gain Snow Spirits, which are now better Sunderas, basically, at least the evolved ones. Here I'm a little bit on the verge. I think the Snow Spirit is actually a little bit inferior to the Sundera, but at the end of the day they can evolve into something better than the Sundera, which the Sundera can't. So it's a little bit of a dilemma, which I leave up to you. It's also a nice decision game part of the build. White Witches and Ice Coffin provide crowd control on a really high level, which is really cool. White Witches, though, don't provide that much damage, and they will never do so because this build doesn't focus them so hard. But we have a few ends that buff them up, so they are a valid choice, but you should see them as a utility unit. The School of Cryomancy, though, is what I really went for, because you have a high synergy with the ice now in form of mana income, which will help you to host more elementals. And if you're playing giant, like I recommend here, you even have a nice synergy with the ice giants terraforming thing. It's really nice. Tier 2 comes, and we are going for artificing for those extra crits, because honestly, I don't know where I should get cheaper melee crits from, and that's why we go here. Seriously, 90% of the reason. Siege Magic, like I said, it buffs up parts of our build, and Siege Breaker is a real nice trait. It makes your supporters even valuable siege units. I really like that. Besides that, neither Bolt Repeaters, Artisan Fortifications, nor Iron Golems are too much of an interesting choice here, but none of them are a bad choice either. Golem Mine gives you an opportunity to build mines wherever you want. It is interesting, insofar as mines synergize with Materium quite nicely. The other tier 2 I went for was Revelry. Mainly because Revels of Carnage helps you to level up your elementals faster. Blood Fury weapons is a really wicked synergy, again, with our entire frontline scheme. It's just a little bit sad that it doesn't go for archers, but we can't have everything, I suppose. And Skulls are just mighty supporters, which I personally think are really good side by side with the Barbarians' cultural supporters. We also gain Revelers Heart for more crits. Who doesn't like that? And Revels of Blood is a nice siege project, but it is, in my humble opinion, a little bit costly on the research point side. You can't safely skip that. Carnival of Flesh, yeah, build it or don't. I wouldn't give it a high priority because it doesn't do so much for you. So, we are reaching now tier 3 territory, and now we're reaching the area where the build gets a little bit more flexible. At this point, you will sit on this Materium and Chaos Affinity point, and that will therefore show you where the build will go. I personally am a big fan of Geomancy Tome. It is a really big number now, especially for elemental builds. Gives us access to all kinds of tier 3 elementals that we want to have. Isn't that cool? And all of our troops get some nice bonuses as well. It's a pretty overloaded tome, which I personally really can't recommend enough. The other tier 3 that I used for this build and enjoy a lot here is Devastation. But you can also go for Pandemonium. Both serve really well, both provide damage. Pandemonium is a little bit more on the supporty side, because Havoc Magic, negative status effects, and you see you have a lot more crowd control abilities on this one. Vessels of Chaos is also not too synergistic with your elemental build, but it is also not a total catastrophe. If you like it, because it's an awesome tome, it's absolutely playable here, but I would recommend Devastation, because Flame Burst weapons are really awesome for all of our elemental troops that we focus on. Focus of Devastation gives our supporters and battle mages that nice capability to knock people out of their defensive stances, and we gain access to a big bad tier 4 shock unit. It's pretty nice. I really didn't find too much which did exceed the power of this. After that, Calamity is a really valid choice, giving you also the 6th point of Chaos Affinity, opening up things that you want to, buffing up all of your troops. I don't want to go too deep into the late game tomes because they're pretty straightforwardly just boosting up your power stupidly. I would recommend Golden Realm or Crucible for the later stages of the game, with a slower nudge towards Crucible, because it's just a little bit more fitting for the whole elemental build, and it ends up with the Creator, which gives us a synergy with here, Shaper's Touch. All of our elemental troops have really high resilience, and since we transformed all of our troops with the Geomancy Tome into elementals, boom, we're really hard to kill. And very powerful at that end. Now, let's talk number 4 about your army setup and combat behavior. So here things are a little bit complicated. Early on, I wouldn't recommend to build more than Pathfinders for a while until you have 5 to 8, depending on the size of your map, that is. And don't waste your money on warriors too much. The Earth Elementals will replace them entirely. The Sundaras, on the other hand, are something which you could invest some money into if you want to breach into some very early game nodes. The Giant Ruler, though, really helps a lot, but heroes come later. After that, tier 2 of yours, War Shamans and Elementals are basically the backbone of your entire army. Not much more glue needed. You can put some Gargoyles and Furies in between, yes, but you don't really have to do much more than keeping those guys alive and support them with Sundaras or Ice Elementals. It works pretty well because you shave off enemies' resistances and you're pretty robust and you deal out a lot of damage. White Witches are the point in your build where you are allowed to control which enemy gets to act, which doesn't. They are tremendously effective by freezing people in choke points and such. It is really, really a nasty thing to do. So you are, in all honesty, early on, mostly limited in your mana income. So my personal recommendation would be to keep your early game army as compact as possible, apply your unit enchantments first, and then summon stuff, because you are very reliant on those unit enchantments. And like I said, Sundaras are basically the best tier 1 units to take from these because they double dip into all of the unit enchantments that you run in this build, and they have a really powerful ranged attack that they get to use every turn, which is really mighty. They are, in some degree, an easier to deal and easier to apply ranged damage than the Furies, because the Furies are much more relying on build-up than the Sundaras. So that's one thing. Your early game combat will be just clearing out areas as per usual. Later down the road, you want to develop more and more armies consisting out of elementals. Therefore, get yourself a couple of these in, but don't overdo it. Early on, 3 to 4 of these guys are really enough, because you've got to think about the cost that you need to shoulder once they fully develop, because that's just something that you also need to pay for. But the wonderful thing is, together with a giant or dragon hero, you can pretty much waltz down whatever you want, because the combination between a hero, a war shaman, and a couple of frontlining elementals is honestly breaching down most nodes with ease. Later in the combat areas, you are really good at hunkering down, persisting, and bursting down people faster than they can react. Put a dent into their formation so they can't retaliate as hard as you can regenerate. The really important part is to bring a couple of War Shaman, so you have that Invigorate thing, and use this Invigorate spell only when you really have something of it. This is probably the worst part about this build, because War Shaman really suck a little bit due to the very high cooldown, but it's a high impact spell. If you hold it back for the proper situations, you get a huge payout. Although I gotta say, I do end up replacing the cultural supporters, if I can, with other supporters quite often, especially Rally of the Leashes and such are a pretty good source. Lastly, Berserkers are, yeah, they are hard-hitting people that basically act like you, like a hero unit, but don't rely too much on them, because you're basically using only 2 or 3 of these tops on one 18 unit army, because we are more inclined on a type of formation fight where these guys mostly fill a job of shaving stuff off our flanks that tries to intrude in our formation. Number 5, cities and Imperium. So your city building, you want to get down your cities fast, and as barbarians, you have a very, very high focus on getting yourself a knowledge income and get yourself as much as possible of that. You are culturally hampered in your knowledge income, and the fact that most of your troops can be summoned leads to the point that you only need to worry about mana income in the first place, and after that you can pump everything into knowledge income, and do so because you are really cheap on the gold side. After these two things are notched off, you can then invest into the gold and other parts of your economy. But in all honesty, mana and research are the most important things, and of course, since we are barbarians, we can pick the most tasty spots with or many scouts and just set up a city wherever we want to. It's really, really pretty easy. Imperium-wise, our build shines by having the capabilities of going into economy boosting in the Materium side of things, reaping war rewards in the Chaos and Shadow type of things. Also want to point out magic origin unit reduction here. Experience gain of tier unit increase here. These two are real powerhouses that you can use. Cheaper buildings, faster cities, and many more of these give your economy just that boost that you need. And play around these as aggressively as you can, because you are building up your economy a little bit slower than most cultures, because that's just barbarians. They have to have drawbacks. Now, number 6, let's talk heroes. So I went on here with the giant, like I said several times, because the terraforming fits very, very well into the ice side of the build. And I love warriors for this build. I could see mages work as well, but my personal preference here was warrior slash mage as a primary hero to start with a ritualist to back it up, to glue the army together and come up for the shortcomings of your war shaman. So my personal ideal army of 3 heroes would therefore consist out of a warrior, a ritualist, and a mage. Very classy setup, but this way you don't need other units too badly, because the ritualist comes in where the war shamans fail, and you have lots of strategic burst where you need it, where your units should fail. I really find this a pretty airtight build, and the tier 3 elementals really hit quite hard. What's really important to note here is that you should go on all of your non-special heroes for stuff like experienced leader, logistics training, and don't sleep on the critical hit adjacency bonuses and or dedications that give critical hit chances. This build loves critical hits because barbarians add a stupid amount of poison damage on their crits, in case you didn't know. So number 7, strategy-wise. As initially said, bring up your cities as fast as you can, because you want to build up the economy as quick as you can, and it only helps if your first Imperium investments are totally dedicated into bringing up cities. This is very, very important because, as you see here, we only are on 300 knowledge in turn 46, which isn't that good. I really did my best that I could, and on that end, this is the real arms race that you have to go for. But the real bright side about it is the roster that you have on tier 1 is basically enough to break the entirety of the AI early game into pieces. All you need to have is enough magic resource to host the army and enough income to build up your cities at the same time. So you should be looking for spots that offer mana nodes, special materials. Ocean nodes that offer lots of research node slots are also really, really awesome. Altogether, your main focus early on is to build up a compact army of 2 banners, preferably, to clear out the environment as quick as possible. And this is what this build can do extremely well. And then you are onto the arms race to build up your economy fast enough to go into the late game stages where you will be then going for more. What this build really has to do, though, is to fight for its preferred victory style as quick as possible, and I would recommend to just punch everybody's faces before they can do to you, because in all honesty, you don't have access to too many tier 5 units. You are a quick hitting thing, and utilize that. Therefore, it's a pretty good build if you want to finish a game fast and such. I really love it. I really hope so do you. So let me know what you think. in the comments. Leave a like, leave a subscribe. Consider checking out the description box. Feel free to support the channel via the given means downstairs, via YouTube channel membership, or whatever you feel like doing. I deeply appreciate. And of course, I want to say a big thanks to all of you who do support the channel, and a big thanks to you for watching this video up until the very end. Glad that you did it, and hope you have a great day. See you soon.